The frosting trembled on the tip of the offset spatula, not from nerves, though Clara Bell's stomach was a tight knot of anticipation. No, it trembled because her hand, usually rock-steady, was vibrating with the raw, humming energy of finally. Tonight, after 3 long years of swallowing bile and smiling through gritted teeth, Veronica Sterling would get exactly what she deserved. Served cold? No. Served exquisitely at precisely 72 degrees Fahrenheit, the perfect temperature for the chantilly cream, crowning the centerpiece of Savannah's most anticipated gala, Clara's Magnolia Blanc cake. Outside the stifling heat of the industrial kitchen, Savannah in June draped itself over the historic district like a damp lace tablecloth. Inside, beneath the unforgiving glare of fluorescent lights, Clara worked with a focused intensity that bordered on ferocious. She was 24, slight in build, with flyaway strands of honey blonde hair escaping her severe bun and sticking to her temples. Her eyes, a startlingly clear blue, rarely lifted from her task, meticulously piping intricate sugar magnolias onto the cake's 4th tier. Each petal was a tiny, glistening sculpture, an edible testament to the obsessive skill honed not just in culinary school, but in the crucible of humiliation Veronica had provided. Clara hadn't set out for revenge. She'd arrived in Savannah 3 years prior, a wide-eyed graduate from the Culinary Institute of America, portfolio bursting with ambitious dessert concepts, heart full of dreams, and head full of the naive belief that talent alone paved the way. She'd landed an externship at Veronica Sterling's eponymous fine dining temple, tucked into a meticulously restored antebellum townhouse. Veronica, then nearing 50, was Savannah royalty, not by blood, but by sheer force of curated perfection, ruthless business acumen, and a soufflé that allegedly made strong men weep. Her silver blonde hair was always immaculate, her designer sheathed dresses flawless, her smile as cool and sharp as a newly honed chef's knife. She radiated an aura of unassailable success. Clara, initially awestruck, threw herself into the work. She scrubbed pots until her hands bled, arrived hours early, stayed hours late, absorbing everything. Veronica noticed Clara's talent, a raw, undeniable spark that threatened Veronica's carefully constructed image as Savannah's undisputed pastry queen. The subtle undermining began. A compliment laced with condescension. Charming effort on the eclairs, dear. Perhaps next time we'll aim for consistency? A helpful suggestion whispered just loud enough for the line cooks to hear. You might want to reference Larousse Gastronomique. Clara, basic techniques are so important. Clara's meticulously balanced macaron batter would mysteriously develop too much humidity overnight. Her signature dessert concept, a deconstructed peach melba with bourbon caramel, was presented by Veronica at a James Beard event as her own latest inspiration, receiving rapturous applause. Clara protested once, timidly, after the peach melba incident. Veronica's smile never wavered, but her eyes turned glacial. Ambition is admirable, Clara, she'd purred, tracing a perfectly manicured nail along the stainless steel counter. But remember your place. You're here to learn. From me, building a reputation takes time and discretion. Wouldn't want anyone thinking you're ungrateful or prone to flights of fancy. The unspoken threat of blacklisting, of shattered reputation before it even began, hung heavy in the air. Clara swallowed her fury, her dreams, her voice. The final, brutal betrayal came a year later. Clara had poured her soul into developing a dessert for Savannah's prestigious Taste of History Gala, an event Veronica chaired. It was a complex, stunning creation. Layers of almond dacquoise, salted caramel mousse, and roasted Georgia peach compote, encased in a shimmering ruby mirror glaze, topped with gold-leafed pecans, a homage to Savannah's southern roots with a modern twist. Veronica had praised it vaguely, then announced she would be presenting her own signature Sterling creation for the gala. Clara, relegated to assistant pastry chef, was tasked with prepping components. The night of the gala, Clara stood anonymously in the bustling kitchen, watching monitors showing the glittering ballroom. Veronica ascended the stage, radiant, to present the dessert. Clara's blood turned to ice. There, on the giant screens, was her dessert. Every layer, every element, the exact plating she'd designed, presented as Veronica Sterling's Southern Sunset Symphony, a bold new vision celebrating our heritage. The applause was thunderous. Veronica beamed, accepting accolades for Clara's genius. Clara confronted her afterward, shaking with rage and disbelief. Veronica merely arched a perfectly sculpted brow. "Prove it, darling. Your scribbled notes? Your word against mine? Savannah knows me. Savannah trusts me. You?" She gave a dismissive little laugh. "You're a talented little baker who got carried away. Be careful. The culinary world is very small, and very unforgiving to those who Overreach. She fired Clara the next day, citing attitude problems. Clara left Savannah, not broken, but forged in white-hot anger. She spent the next 2 years working grueling shifts in anonymous hotel kitchens from Miami to Chicago, saving every penny, honing her craft to an even sharper edge. She studied not just recipes, but people. She learned the power of presentation, the subtle language of ingredients, the way a perfectly balanced dish could evoke memory, emotion, or discomfort. She learned patience. And she nurtured the cold, hard seed of revenge, watering it not with tears, but with resolve. It wasn't about screaming accusations. It was about exposing the rot beneath Veronica Sterling's perfect frosting. It was about serving the truth on a silver platter, so beautifully presented that Veronica would have no choice but to taste her own deceit. The opportunity arrived like a perfectly risen soufflé. The Savannah Historic Preservation Society announced their annual fundraising gala, their biggest event, celebrating the city's unique architecture. And they needed a new pastry chef. Veronica Sterling, predictably, had assumed she'd be asked, but the Society's new, younger events coordinator, Maya Chen, had heard whispers. Whispers about a brilliant young pastry chef named Clara Bell, known for breathtakingly original work, and a mysterious, abrupt departure from Savannah years prior. Maya, ambitious and unimpressed by established hierarchies, sought Clara out. Clara, operating now under her own small LLC, Bellissima Confections, accepted the commission. The fee was substantial, the platform perfect. Veronica, initially furious at being bypassed, had been mollified and likely intrigued when Maya mentioned Clara would be creating something inspired by Savannah's historic grandeur. Veronica assumed it was flattery, a nod to her own dominance. She secured her usual table, front and center. Clara moved back to Savannah quietly, renting a small, sun-baked cottage with a functional kitchen far from the historic district. She became a ghost, seen only at dawn buying market-fresh ingredients, or late at night through the cottage window, bent over her work. She meticulously planned her revenge, not as a poison, but as a revelation. The dessert itself had to be undeniably magnificent, a career-defining masterpiece. But woven into its very essence, its presentation, its story, would be the truth, hence the Magnolia Blanc. 5 pristine tiers of vanilla bean genoise layered with white chocolate ganache, infused with a hint of local honey, and a core of tart, almost shocking passion fruit curd, the hidden bite. The exterior was a marvel, covered in flawless white chocolate mirror glaze like polished marble. Adorning it were dozens of handcrafted sugar magnolias, so lifelike they seemed to tremble, their centers dusted with edible gold. It was breathtaking, elegant, undeniably Southern, and utterly original. But the true weapon lay in the presentation narrative Clara had crafted for Maya. The gala buzzed with the low hum of wealth and social currency. Crystal chandeliers cast diamonds of light on silk gowns and tailored tuxedos. The air shimmered with expensive perfume and the clink of champagne flutes. Veronica Sterling held court at her prime table, radiating practiced charm. Her gaze, however, kept flicking towards the discreetly veiled dessert display at the back of the stage. Annoyance warred with curiosity. Who was this Clara Bell, daring to command the spotlight at her event? Dinner service concluded. Maya Chen, sleek in an emerald gown, took the stage. The spotlight found her. "Ladies and gentlemen," her voice, clear and confident, cut through the murmur. "We are so deeply grateful for your support tonight, preserving the unique beauty that is Savannah." Polite applause. "And now a moment we've all been anticipating. To conclude this evening on a truly unforgettable note, we commissioned a bespoke creation, a centerpiece embodying Savannah's spirit, resilience, grace, and enduring beauty through the artistry of pastry." A collective murmur of appreciation. Veronica's smile tightened. "We are thrilled to welcome back a uniquely talented Savannah voice," Maya continued, her gaze sweeping the room. "A young woman whose vision, though briefly silenced, has returned stronger and more brilliant than ever. Please welcome Clara Bell, presenting her original creation, Magnolia Blanc, a testament to true vision." The name landed like a pebble in a still pond. Back, silenced, true vision, heads turned, whispers rippled. Veronica's perfectly composed face went utterly still, a porcelain mask cracking at the edges. Clara Bell? Here? Now? The heavy velvet curtain concealing the dessert display parted. Gasps filled the ballroom. Bathed in a soft spotlight, the Magnolia Blanc stood in majestic glory on its mirrored pedestal. It wasn't just a cake. It was an architectural marvel in sugar and chocolate, radiating pure, ethereal elegance. The intricate sugar magnolias seemed to glow. Clara stepped from the shadows beside the display. She wore a simple, impeccably tailored chef's jacket in pristine white, her hair now sleekly pulled back. She looked young, yes, but there was nothing fragile about her. Her posture was straight, her gaze steady as it swept the room, lingering for a fraction of a second on Veronica's frozen table. There was no anger visible, only a profound, unnerving calm. She picked up a small microphone. Her voice, when it came, was clear and resonant, carrying effortlessly. No tremors, just certainty. "Good evening. Thank you, Maya, and thank you to the Preservation Society for this incredible honor." She paused, her eyes finding Veronica's again. "The Magnolia Blanc is indeed inspired by Savannah, by its strength, its quiet dignity, its ability to weather storms and bloom again, more beautiful than before." She gestured gracefully towards the cake. "Magnolias symbolize endurance, nobility, and dignity. Qualities Savannah possesses in abundance, qualities I've had to learn myself." A subtle shift in the room. People leaned in. This wasn't the usual chef's spiel. "Creating this," Clara continued, her hand hovering near the glistening surface, "was a journey back to roots that were almost severed, back to a passion that was almost extinguished by the harsh realities sometimes faced when vision is undervalued and voice is silenced." She didn't look at Veronica, but everyone else did. The air crackled. "The Genoise," Clara explained, her tone becoming more technical yet still captivating, "is light but resilient. The white chocolate ganache, smooth and rich, speaks of tradition, sweetness, but note the local honey. A reminder that true sweetness comes from authenticity, from place, not artifice." She paused. "And then the heart. The passion fruit curd, tart, vibrant, unapologetically bold, a necessary counterpoint, because true beauty, enduring beauty, isn't just sweet perfection. It has depth, it has character, it has truth." She picked up a gleaming silver server. "Sometimes," she said, her voice dropping slightly, imbued with quiet intensity, "the most beautiful creations are born not just from inspiration, but from the fire of injustice, from the refusal to let your vision be stolen, your voice be silenced." She cut a perfect slice, revealing the stunning layers. The white genoise, the pale ganache, the vibrant yellow passion fruit core. This dessert is a testament to resilience, to the power of returning, not with bitterness, but with greater clarity, greater strength, an undeniable proof of one's own vision. She placed the slice on a small plate held by a server. "It is," she concluded, locking eyes directly with Veronica across the hushed room, "authentically and completely my own. Enjoy." The applause started slowly, then built into a wave. It wasn't just polite, it was charged with understanding, with admiration, with the thrilling undercurrent of scandal deliciously served. People clapped for the stunning cake, yes, but they clapped louder for the young woman standing tall, for the story she'd woven into the very essence of her creation. They clapped for the victory. Veronica Sterling sat rigidly. The color had drained completely from her face, leaving her expertly applied makeup stark and unnatural. Her smile was a rictus, a grotesque parody of her usual charm. She couldn't look away from Clara, nor from the slice of cake being paraded towards her table by a server. The vibrant yellow passion fruit curd seemed to pulse, an accusation on a plate. The carefully chosen words, stolen, silenced, authenticity, true vision, echoed in the sudden silence that had fallen around her table. Her friends, her patrons, looked at her with dawning comprehension, then quickly looked away, their expressions a mixture of shock, embarrassment, and morbid fascination. The whispers weren't just ripples now, they were a current swirling directly around her. Clara didn't linger. She offered a small, composed bow, handed the microphone back to Maya, who gave her a barely perceptible nod of fierce solidarity, and retreated back into the shadows near the stage. Her work was done. The bomb had been detonated with flawless precision, wrapped not in shrapnel but in sugar and artistry. The fallout was already visible on Veronica's face, a public unmasking more devastating than any shouted accusation. The rest of the evening unfolded in a surreal hum for Clara. She remained near the display, a silent guardian of her creation, as servers meticulously sliced and served the Magnolia Blanc. Each plate carried a miniature revelation, the elegant white exterior giving way to the bold tart heart. Guests exclaimed over the flavors, the textures, the sheer beauty. But the compliments directed at Clara now carried a different weight. Eyes held a new respect, a spark of curiosity, often accompanied by a discreet glance towards Veronica's table. "Exquisite, my dear," murmured Mrs. Abernathy, a formidable society matron whose family name adorned half the historic district plaques. Her gaze was sharp, knowing, and quite telling. "Welcome back to Savannah." She patted Clara's hand, a gesture loaded with unspoken alliance. A well-known food critic, sampling the cake with intense focus, sought Clara out. "The passion fruit curd, inspired," he said, his voice low. "A masterstroke, adds the necessary complexity. Almost defiant?" He raised an eyebrow, a silent question hanging in the air. Clara simply smiled serenely. Just balancing the sweetness, sir. Life requires balance, don't you think? Veronica remained at her table, a statue of crumbling ice. She picked at her slice, unable to bring herself to take a bite of the vibrant yellow heart, the symbol of Clara's stolen voice. Her attempts at conversation with her table mates fell flat, met with strained smiles and sudden preoccupations with napkins or wine glasses. Her social fortress, meticulously built over decades, was showing cracks under the weight of Clara's elegant truth bomb. The humiliation wasn't loud, it was a suffocating silence, the deafening absence of her usual gravitational pull. People deliberately didn't catch her eye. The queen bee had been dethroned, not by force, but by the undeniable brilliance of the artisan she'd tried to crush. Later, as the gala wound down, Clara supervised the careful dismantling of her creation's remains. The core structure was gone, but sugar magnolias were carefully collected as keepsakes for the society board. As she boxed the last few, a familiar cloying perfume announced a presence. Clara didn't need to turn. Clever. Veronica's voice was a low rasp, stripped of its usual melodic condescension. It was raw, scraped bare by fury and humiliation. She stood a few feet away, her posture rigid, her eyes burning holes in Clara's back. A cheap stunt, playing the victim for sympathy. Clara closed the box with deliberate calm and finally turned. She met Veronica's gaze directly. The older woman looked smaller somehow, diminished, the impeccable facade fractured. The hatred in her eyes was pure, undiluted. It wasn't cheap, Veronica, Clara said, her voice quiet but carrying in the near-empty space. It cost me 3 years. It cost me my naivete. It cost me believing talent and hard work were enough in a world where people like you operate. She took a step closer. This wasn't about sympathy. It was about evidence, served publicly. The Magnolia Blanc is mine. Everyone here tasted its originality. Everyone heard its story. You can't steal this. You can't silence it. Veronica flinched as if struck. You little nobody, she hissed. You think this changes anything? Savannah will forget by next week. Will they? Clara tilted her head, a ghost of her old pre-betrayal curiosity in her eyes, now tempered with steel. Will Mrs. Abernathy forget? Will the food critic who called the passion fruit defiant forget? Will Maya Chen, who trusted my true vision, forget? She gestured towards the departing guests, their chatter filled with mentions of the cake and the remarkable young chef. You built your reputation on perfection, Veronica. Tonight everyone saw the crack. They saw the insecurity beneath the icing. They saw what you did. Clara picked up her toolbox. Savannah might forgive many things, but it has a long memory for hypocrisy, especially when it's served so sweetly. She didn't wait for a response. She walked away, leaving Veronica Sterling standing alone amidst the detritus of the gala, the fading scent of champagne and perfume, and the echoing silence of her own ruin. The victory wasn't violent. It wasn't loud. It was the quiet, irrevocable shift in perception Clara had meticulously engineered. The theft was acknowledged. The silencer was silenced. The truth was tasted, and it was delicious. The Savannah summer air, thick and warm, felt different on Clara's skin as she stepped outside. Lighter, cleaner. The anger that had fueled her for so long hadn't vanished, but it had transmuted. It was no longer a consuming fire. It was the warm, steady glow of a forge that had tempered her into something stronger. She hadn't just gotten revenge. She had reclaimed herself. News traveled fast in Savannah's close-knit circles. The gala was the talk of every garden party, bridge game, and ladies' luncheon for weeks. The Magnolia Blanc was dissected, its flavors praised, its symbolism analyzed. Clara Bell's name was on everyone's lips, accompanied by knowing glances and lowered voices whenever Veronica Sterling was mentioned. The True Vision tagline stuck. Offers began flooding into Bellissima confections, not just for events, but for consultations, collaborations, even a potential cookbook deal focusing on authentic Southern reinvention. La Veronica Sterling's world contracted. Reservations at Sterling's dipped noticeably. Longtime patrons, while perhaps not abandoning her entirely, were suddenly busy. The society columns, once fawning, now carried a subtle chill, referencing the gala's triumphant debut of Clara Bell without mentioning Veronica at all. The worst blow came when the James Beard Foundation, citing a need for fresh perspectives, quietly removed her from consideration for an award she'd been virtually guaranteed. The silence from that quarter was deafening. Clara, meanwhile, thrived. She leased a small, bright storefront on a charming side street, transforming it into the Bellissima Confections boutique. It was warm and inviting, smelling of vanilla, caramel, and possibility. She hired 2 assistants, eager, talented young women she treated with the respect she'd been denied. Her creations were innovative yet comforting, beautiful yet substantial, always carrying that signature hint of unexpected depth. A raspberry coulis with black pepper, a chocolate tart with a whisper of smoked sea salt. People didn't just buy her pastries, they bought pieces of her reclaimed story. One sweltering afternoon, about 6 months after the gala, Clara was perfecting a new honey lavender panna cotta when the little bell above her shop door tinkled. She looked up, expecting Mrs. Abernathy for her weekly eclair. It was Veronica Sterling. She looked older. The impeccable armor was still there, but it seemed heavier, less polished. Fine lines around her eyes and mouth were more pronounced. Her signature silver blonde hair lacked its usual luster. She stood just inside the door, clutching a designer handbag like a shield, her gaze sweeping the cheerful, busy shop, the display cases gleaming with colorful confections, the small tables filled with chatting customers, Clara's assistants laughing as they piped frosting, a place buzzing with life and warmth, the antithesis of Veronica's own increasingly sterile domain. Clara felt a flicker of the old tension, quickly banked. She wiped her hands on her apron and walked calmly to the counter. "Veronica, can I help you?" Veronica approached, her heels clicking sharply on the tile floor. She didn't meet Clara's eyes directly, focusing instead on the panna cotta Clara had been working on. "I need a cake," she stated, her voice tight, "for a private function. Something elegant, simple." Clara nodded slowly. "Of course. What kind of function? Birthday? Anniversary?" She kept her tone professional, neutral. Veronica hesitated. "A closing," she said finally, the word tasting bitter. "The restaurant. I'm relocating." The admission cost her. Sterling's hadn't officially announced its closure, but the rumors were rampant. Savannah hadn't forgotten. Clara didn't react with pity or gloating. She simply pulled out her order pad. "I see. Size? Flavors? Any specific design?" Veronica looked lost for a moment, adrift in a world she no longer controlled. She glanced around the shop again, her eyes lingering on a framed article about Clara's James Beard nomination, a nomination for emerging talent, a category Veronica had once dominated. A muscle twitched in her jaw. Something white, Veronica murmured. "Vanilla? No frills." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Just something decent." There it was, not an apology, not remorse, but an acknowledgement, a surrender, a request for something simple, decent, from the person whose vision she deemed unworthy. It was the closest Clara would ever get to an admission of defeat. Clara wrote it down. A classic vanilla butter cake, 2 tiers, simple white buttercream finish, elegant, understated. Will that suffice? She met Veronica's eyes then. The older woman flinched, seeing no triumph there, only calm assessment, no lingering hate, just distance. "Yes," Veronica breathed. "That will suffice." She gave the details, paid a deposit in crisp bills, and turned to leave without another word. She paused at the door, her hand on the handle, her back to Clara. For a second her shoulders slumped, the rigid posture finally breaking under an invisible weight. Then she straightened, pulled the door open, and stepped back into the Savannah heat, disappearing down the street. Clara watched her go. The old anger didn't flare. Instead, she felt a profound sense of closure, as clean and final as the snap of a perfectly tempered chocolate bar. The scales weren't just balanced, they were reset. Veronica was leaving, diminished, carrying the taste of her own downfall. Clara was here, rooted, growing, her vision finally her own. She looked down at the order pad. Veronica Sterling, classic vanilla, simple, decent. A small, wry smile touched Clara's lips. Sweetest revenge indeed. It wasn't about destruction. It was about building something beautiful, resilient, and undeniably hers on the ashes of the past. She picked up her piping bag, filled it with honey lavender cream, and began decorating the panna cotta with delicate sugared flowers. Life, like her best desserts, was all about the perfect balance. And hers, finally, tasted just right.